Hello, everyone. Welcome to this, our next live Hangout discussion in our sort of coronavirus series of online events with the Secular Student Alliance. I'm really excited about this one. When I first started organizing these, I started thinking of, who could help us, run these events and engage in some really interesting conversations, because the last thing we need in this moment is just me talking all the time. So I reached out to some of my favorite people, and Karma was super excited to do this and to kind of share some of her expertise with us and what she's thinking about. So Karma is a graduate student at Southeast Missouri State in literature. Is that correct?
Yep.
Literature and writing. And so who better to help us think about the way that art sustains us, especially in times of crisis and anxiety like we're experiencing right now. So so Karma's going to take it away and sort of talk us through this, and then we really want to open it up for a conversation with you. So be thinking of your questions or your comments or just your own personal experience, and be ready to share that. We're also streaming live on Facebook, so welcome to all of you that are joining us on Facebook. We will keep track of your questions there as well. So Karma, without any further delay, take it away.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity. I'm super excited to be presenting about this. Like Ryan mentioned, I am a graduate student at Southeast Missouri State University. I'm studying to get my master's degree in English studies. So lots of reading, lots of writing, lots of cool stuff. And after that, I want to go on and spend my life doing the same thing, sort of like engaging and learning about the arts and things like that. So that's just a little bit about me. I swear this won't be the whole presentation, just me rambling about my life goals. But I think it's important to sort of share the motivation as to why I decided to present about art and like why it's important. So first of all, like I said, that's sort of my life goal, is to just spend my time learning and teaching about the arts. I grew up in a household with a parent who had a master's degree in painting. So our house is covered in art all the time. We were always artistic kids, writing, drawing, sculpting when it wasn't too messy. All of the cool little art infomercial things, we bought all those up. So this has sort of been my entire life, has been sort of surrounded by art. And it's easy to forget how important it is, I really think. And that's why I wanted to sort of kind of get back to that with everybody today. Think about the importance of art, why we sort of engage in these things, how attitudes about art sort of affect the way that we engage with art and think about art, and how those things are changing now based on the situation that we're in, right? So that's just a little bit of context, I guess, for this presentation. Hopefully you get something out of it. I'm really excited to have a really good discussion about it. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start for real. So I first wanted to talk a little bit about the attitudes, like sort of surrounding art and things like that, and how those things have changed. You can go ahead and flip slides around if you want. But first, a little more contextualizing, I guess. Lots of art is sort of paywalled, if that makes sense, which I totally understand, like artists deserve to be paid and everything. That's a thing that we'll get into a little bit later. But right now, in a time of high stress and hardship, the thing that I've noticed most is there's not been anything more impactful, I think, than the amount of compassion that artists have shown. So I've put a few pictures up here for context. We've got people dedicating their time and their skills and their art to help us get through a hard time. Like Phantom of the Opera was free on YouTube for a few days, and there are a bunch of concert series, living room concert series, which I think are really cool because we can't really engage in big gatherings like that right now. The Parks and Recreation crew came back to do a special that really emphasized taking care of yourself and prioritizing your mental health and things like that. So using art as a way to not only connect people, but comfort people. and build community and make you feel like maybe you're not so alone after all. So I thought that was pretty cool. But that hasn't always been the case. So on the next slide, I think, is what I started to talk about, is the attitudes about art that have sort of changed through the ages. So we talk about these things all the time in classrooms, right? How impactful artists like Da Vinci and Shakespeare and Mozart were, right? How art used to be really sustainable and actually kind of like prestigious, right? So, I mean, if you think about how renowned, like I said, like Shakespeare and Mozart were, Shakespeare was part of the Queen's court, you know, that's like as high as it can go. But it feels like we've kind of lost that a little bit. And I don't know if everyone agrees or not. This is just how I sort of see it. It feels like we've lost that a little bit. We have, now like if you mention like you're an artist, it's kind of like a dirty word. I know like when I went into English and I was like, oh, I'm in the humanities, I'm in the arts, I study English. I get a lot of eye rolls. I get a lot of, oh, well, I hope you learn how to serve my burger with fries. Like things like that, sort of kind of making the impact of art feel like it's not going to pay off. Yeah, exactly. People think that like if you're majoring in the arts, you're not ever going to make anything of yourself. There's not a good enough chance for you to make an impact or do something successful. And I think a lot of that's related to money, which is why this other points on the screen is that visual and performing artists are the second lowest paid in higher education, just barely above theology. So you can see that like the value that people have sort of put on artists is reflected in those types of things. At our university, I know our highest paid department is the business department. So those are things that have sort of taken the place of art as we've sort of grown and evolved. It's commodity, I guess. And I guess a lot of people in society feel like art can't be a commodity anymore. So you need to learn how to basically make the most of yourself in terms of money and monetary value. And I think a lot of that has to do with art, because this is a thing I hear a lot too. Everybody can be an artist is sort of what the attitude is now. That art isn't hard, that art isn't worth doing because it's not expanding yourself to the biggest paycheck that you can, or making the most difference in business or society, right? But I think that that's a little wrong. I think that art actually impacts our society a lot more than people give it credit for. And I think that we've lost sight of that. Let me see what else I've got here. So yeah, I mean, like that negative response comes up every time I tell somebody I'm an English major, which is awful because I feel like I can do a lot of world changing where I'm at, right? Like there are things that I could teach people, you know, like what's important, literacy, like literacy is really important, making sure that the population's literate and has critical thinking skills. Those are things that artists provide. Design, things like that, things that we don't think about being integral parts of creating a functioning society. Those are the things that art provides. So, I mean, if we think about the value of art, which I think is my next slide, a lot of this plays into that. So the value of art, first of all, I mean, if we think about it in the most primitive sense, right? Art started as a tool to document history. So cave paintings and hieroglyphs and things like that. Art's always sort of been a way to remember where we came from. Art tells us sort of like where our ancestors have been and where they went and where we might be going. It's a way to keep track of everything that's happening around us, not even just through those things. I know most specifically, I remember when I think of Henry V, I think of that really, really, really big painting of him, the painting that's like larger than life of him sort of like standing there looking all proud. That's what I think of when I think of Henry V, right? Other than, you know, like the 7 wives. But I wouldn't have learned about those things if I were in English classes though. But those portraits and things like that are also not only a great way to record our history and record what these people looked like and give us an idea of their attitudes and things like that. But they're also a mode for recording social attitudes of the times, right? I mean, you can really tell that Shakespeare kisses up to the Queen a lot in his work. That's sort of that was sort of the attitude that he had. There was a lot of tension around Queen Elizabeth's rule, and Shakespeare took a side of that, and you can tell. And there are other artists out there who took the other side, and you can tell. In the painting, I know I'm going on about Elizabeth, but in the painting, the rainbow portrait of Elizabeth, she's wearing this dress, and it's got eyeballs all over. It's like a painting of her in a dress with eyes all over it, which was sort of a social commentary on the eye of the state, right? So, and the eyes are all on her. And so that's sort of a way that art not only just straightforwardly helps us keep track of history, but it also shows us maybe through some kind of hidden and subdued avenues what was going on at the time, right? I mean, you can see this in literature as well. Toni Morrison in Sula, which was written in the heat of the Vietnam War, while Morrison was raising two boys. Like, you can see a lot of that anxiety about sending her sons to war in that book, right? So to tell us about the attitudes of the time and the things that were going on, to situate itself in the culture, that's what art does a lot. So we can learn a lot, not just about art and literature through art and literature, but we can learn about cultural happenings as well and the attitudes about those cultural happenings. I get so excited about that. I don't know why I love that stuff, but I do. Art is also a venue to experience and process emotion. And I think that this is why it makes it so important right now. And we'll get to that in a minute. But art is used in a lot of therapies. I know that I used to work at an autism center, and we used a lot of paint therapy, clay therapy, things like that, because it's a way for, as artists engaging in art, we can sort through our feelings, experience emotions, cope with those emotions, things like that, right? Not only. And then I added this picture of Cameron from Ferris Bueller's Day Off in front of the painting in the museum, because not only is creating art a really good way to experience and process emotion, but experiencing art is also a good way to do that. So not only does making art make you feel, but looking at art makes you feel, right? So I feel like that's a really impactful scene in the movie. It's always emotional to me. Maybe it's not emotional to everybody. I also just really love Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So, but you know, experiencing art really gives us a venue to experience and process emotions and things like that as well. I know that, like, this is like kind of a lame example, right? But I don't want to spoil it too bad, but it came out a while ago in Infinity War, in the scene where everyone sort of dusts out, you know, like, what kind of emotions did we experience there, and what kind of emotions did that bring up, right? I didn't walk out of there without seeing everybody else around me crying, without myself being crying, right? So that's what I feel is like valuable about art, is that it can make us feel so deeply for things that aren't necessarily tangibly real, right? And it has all these opportunities to make you sort of reevaluate the way that you feel about aspects of that art that can translate into everyday life, right? So I don't know, I think that's super cool too, is that art is such a tool for emotion. And I think that's really great. You know, like getting invested in a good book or a good movie, things like that can always make me emotional. I also think that art is a really great avenue to connecting with others. I think that probably the most cliche pickup line is dinner and a movie, right? So that's what we do, dinner and a movie. It's not just dinner, it's dinner and a movie. It's experiencing culinary art with the visual art of movies, right? I know that like there are lots of new like date night venues with paint nights and like the most iconic scene from the 80s or the 1990s, I guess it was 1990, Ghost, where they're sculpting together on the wheel, the pottery wheel, and it's just such a moment of connection, right? Like such a romantic moment right there, even though it's not necessarily a thing that you would specifically think about being romantic, right? So art being an avenue to connect yourself with others, I think is one of the most valuable functions that it has as well, right? So that's what I had about that. So if we want to flop on over to the next slide, I've got a little bit more to say about it. Sorry, I get so excited, my throat hurts. But so I think that maybe these attitudes that we have about art being not as valuable, not as commodifiable, things like that are kind of getting reversed right now. So we talked a lot about that a little bit earlier, and I think people are starting to realize the values of art, right? Starting to realize how important art has always been and art has become specifically in this time of hardship, right? So people are kind of understanding that, okay, like maybe this isn't as, there's more payoff than I thought, right? I've noticed sort of myself, I get a lot less criticism when I tell somebody in the middle, I guess in the middle of the pandemic, when you say, oh, I'm an English major, people say, oh, that's really nice, instead of, okay, I hope you like working at McDonald's, because that's what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. I think people are realizing that it's important. But why? Because it's helping us stay entertained, first of all. You know, we can't go out to movie theaters, but the fact that the Trolls World Tour movie made over $95 million at straight to video release is insane. Like, people are relying on art more than ever, I think, to stay entertained. I've been playing a lot of video games as well, and that's, you know, that's art as well. So like, people render that, people design that, and so it's helping us stay entertained. It's helping us stay sort of like comfortable, right, in our homes, as we can't, you know, like go out and go to movies or go to concerts, things like that. We can't go running as much, or we can't go to the park as much. It's also a really good coping mechanism. I talked a little bit about that earlier. But like I said, art's used in a lot of therapies. My mom does like therapeutic, like coloring pages, and those things, man, I've never been so calm in my life until I spent 4.5 hours coloring a mandala, right? So those things, like, art is a good way to cope with anxieties and stress. And that's obviously, we're in a pretty high stress situation right now, right? I know I am going stir crazy not being able to go anywhere, and my state's out of lockdown. I'm still not going anywhere, but my state's out of lockdown, and I still am so high stress because it's just a stressful situation, right? So being that we're all, you know, nationally, globally experiencing more stress, I think that art as a coping mechanism is very, very important right now. And it's also, it's like easier to get your hands on now, more accessible. That's the word I was looking for. It's more accessible now because of all these free concerts, because of all of these databases that have popped up for free for limited times while we're sort of experiencing social distancing. So it's more accessible now, and it's easier to use it to cope. It's easier to get to help us stay entertained. And it's also still connecting us, right? So I know that I coming from a creative writing background, I'm really excited when I can read something on Facebook now that I really find that I relate with, right? So, you know, through writing, through poems, through street art has become really, really big since there's nobody on the streets. Street art is so impactful right now, at least to me. Seeing all the street art has been amazing. Things that you can really like connect with the artist about, right? So even though you're not necessarily meeting them, you're having a connection with them. And I think that's really important as well too, because so many of us are lacking those social connections right now. that's why I was so excited to do this, because people, oh my gosh. But you know, I'm home by myself all day, and the way that I stay connected with my friends is through art. Through we have video game lobbies, so we play video games together, um, which is art. You know, we have some of us have Zoom meetings where we'll just sort of, you know, like write. And I know that there have been lots of conferences that got canceled, lots of writers' conferences that got canceled. They're doing it dial in, you know, and sharing their art, things like that. So I think that it's also a good avenue to spark discussion in sort of maybe like presentations like this that I've noticed have been happening a lot more. I know that when I saw the movie, this is an example from way back far, but when I saw the movie Us with my fiance, the Jordan Peele movie, which is absolute art. If you haven't seen it, you should. We had such an amazing discussion about that movie. We talked about that movie for 3 days, and we didn't always agree about it. And you know, I got so passionate about it because I'm so interested in learning about like critical and cultural theories that I was just so excited, like, oh my gosh, I know the things about this movie and I want to talk about them all the time. And he's definitely from a different background. He's from like more of a social science background. So he doesn't think about things in the same way that I do, like our brains work different, but we had such a good discussion about it that like I'm so thankful that we went to see it together, right? And now they're doing Netflix viewing parties. Those are good ways to connect with people and spark discussions and spark connections, right? You learn things about people that you never sort of thought that you would learn. You have great conversations with people that sort of stick in your mind, right? And forge those connections. So that's, I mean, I think people are really reversing this trend, right? Of kind of having this negative attitude about art. So that's sort of, I don't know, that's how I feel. But I know that we're sort of running a little early, probably because I talked too long or talked too fast. But I wanted to really hear like what everybody else thinks, especially like how art's helping you sort of cope through hard situations, how it has in the past, how it is now, what kind of like art things you're doing to keep you going lately, right? And whether or not you agree with me. Like, do you think that opinions and attitudes about art are sort of changing and people are realizing the value, or do you think it has no value at all and I'm just crazy, right? So I don't know. Like, I think that part of what I really wanted to do here is like connect with everybody and see sort of how everyone else feels. So maybe we can gauge this on a better level, right?
Thank you so much, Karma. Yeah, it's so much to talk about there. So many little, I found my mind even wandering as you would talk about something, because I wanted to, I was following that train of thought in my mind. But yeah, if you, I think just general responses to Karma's presentation. I have a few questions I would love to pose, but if anybody wants to just unmute themselves and you know, ask a question or make an observation. I know some of you were making some observations in the chat. There's a social worker with us who uses art. So I don't know, Shelby, if you want to say anything about that publicly, love to hear from you.
Sure, I'll jump in. I'm a good friend of Karma in person, and I was an SSA in college, and now I'm done with that. But yeah, I mean, I never really considered myself to be an artistic person. I can barely draw a stick figure myself. But one thing that I really enjoy doing with my kiddos, I work at a 3rd through 5th grade elementary building. Um, I have some kids on my caseload who, you know, have ADHD and have a hard time just following directions, and we're just like working on, you know, attention and controlling your impulses and things like that to help in the classroom. And so we'll pull up a video on YouTube of, you know, someone explaining step by step how to draw something, and we'll pick one of their favorite characters, like a Star Wars character or someone from the Avengers or something, and you know, just go through those steps. And I see these kids who can't sit still in a chair like just relax their whole body and get so into it, and it's just awesome. And then I've got other kids, like I mentioned in my chat comment, the Play-Doh and things like that, and I've got different you know, there's sensory aspects to that as well, of playing with the kinetic sand, or different putties and things like that. But yeah, I mean, in my personal life, I've been trying to branch out more and have done some different workshops now that I'm finally done being a student. Now I'm just like taking things for fun, just doing like different art workshops, and have gotten into acrylic paint pouring and making wreaths and all kinds of different things in this past year. And I'm enjoying that. So I've been trying to work on some different things at home now that I'm working from home and have a lot more free time on my hands. But yeah, I just wanted to share some of that, like you said, the art therapy stuff, and from a professional perspective and personal life. So that is that. I'll mute myself again.
Yeah, that's so great. How would you, I don't know, some of you would identify as artists. It's one of those things where maybe we're all timid to identify as artists, even, you know, unless we're like formally trained. I mean, that's one of the things with being an academic, you know, with talking about things with academics. We had the previous hangout that we did was about Albert Camus' novel, The Plague. And you wouldn't believe the trouble I had getting someone to come and be a conversation partner with me, because the first thing they would say is, well, I just want you to know I'm not an academic expert on Albert Camus. And I'm like, it's fine. We don't need an academic expert, just someone who loves it and knows a little bit about it. How do you, like, I get terrified, honestly, when I think about visual arts, like doing it myself. I love art. I love museums. I love visual, you know, sort of taking in art as a viewer, or experiencing that. But when someone hands me, like, if you were to like hand me a paintbrush and a piece of paper or a canvas and say, you know, have a great time, I would just be like, I don't know what to do. Like, how do you help people, those of you that do this kind of thing, like, how can you help people engage that if it's a little fearful for them? Any thoughts? How any of you have done that yourself? Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm a photographer. Hey, my name's Kevin. Hey, Karma. For one, I want to say you are not crazy. So go ahead and get rid of that thought. I know you were saying that in jest, but you know, that's like the struggle of the artist, is to think that they're the only one. And art always speaks what art and music speak what words cannot speak. And it reveals a vulnerability in a person. I mean, it takes such incredible courage to put yourself out there the way that an artist does, and to really put their heart on the paper. And to your thought, Ryan, about being qualified, I think that's always a fear, especially in art or in life in general, is that you feel like you're never qualified enough. But there has to be a balance between knowing and doing, and being a good steward with what you do know, and just moving forward with it. And as an artist, you're always going to be pushing the boundaries, and you're always going to be on the edge of what is deemed accessible and what is understood. And so there's always going to be a part of you that's misunderstood. And there's a tension there, you know, of like wanting to be understood, but at the same time, not wanting to fit in, but wanting to fit in. And that's always going to be the problem of the artist, but it's a good thing, because living in that tension is where art takes place.
Right. And I think if I can add onto your point, as well, coming from like I teach now, like that's part of my assignment as a graduate student, is I teach a course in writing for freshmen. And so I think that to your question, Ryan, this is something that helps me answer that question, right? Because I teach people how to create every day, right? That's my job, is I help students learn how to best create in writing. So I think like my best advice is like, and this comes from my advisor, who I adore very much, and she tells me this all the time, to be good at a thing, you have to be really, really bad at it first. So to do something, you have to like start from a place of not knowing or not necessarily being skilled in it, but you have to keep doing it to grow. So even though it might be crazy, scary, intimidating, right? It's horrifying, you know, like what if you do it and what if you're bad at it? You just got to do it bad for a little while to learn how to do it good. Like I'm learning how to cook right now. Oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how many things I've ruined in the past month and a half, right? Because I have to do it bad before I can do it good, right? I have to mess up to figure out how to do it right next time. So I think that that's just the biggest point of advice, is like, you just got to be bad at it first.
That's great. I love that. And I do relate to that in cooking. I do love to cook. And I guess that's, but I sort of cook by number, you know,
Yeah.
if I can make a comparison to painting. I'm getting better at just, you know, finding some stuff and throwing it together. And, but I think there is a lot of there's a lot of fundamentals to learn about cooking, like there is any other type of art. Emily, do you want to ask your question? Or I can read it, but I'd rather you say it.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I just wrote, I think a lot of artists, including myself, have been having trouble creating right now. Do you have any suggestions or thoughts on how to motivate yourself and why there's so much hesitation to make art?
That's a really good question. Because I find myself in the same position a lot. And this is a thing that I am doing therapy for right now, which is like scary and vulnerable, but it's been really helpful. I think that a lot of artists right now are having trouble creating because, I mean, it's hard to focus on creating when you're focusing on survival first, right? So it's that like lizard brain, amygdala type thing where it's you're focusing all your energy on sort of like survival tactics, even if you know you're comfortable in your home, if you're, you know, not struggling with finances or anything, it's still sort of like a fight or flight situation right now, right? Because everything feels so dangerous, you know, going to the store feels dangerous, getting your mail from the mailman feels dangerous, right? So I think that that's part of what I sort of explored like in my time with a counselor. Is I feel not motivated to do anything, even things I love, right? It's because that survival brain is exhausting you. And you know, honestly, the way I sort of overcome that is not always successful. So maybe I'm not the best person to speak on this. Maybe somebody else can speak on it. But a lot of the times I just have to sort of like get to a place where I say, okay, like I have a roof over my head. Like right now I don't have any past due bills, or I don't have there's nothing that's an immediate threat right now in this room to me. So I can focus on creating. Like I said, it's not always successful, partly probably because I have anxiety, but maybe somebody else has some helpful information as well.
Any other thoughts about how to overcome the inertia to create right now?
Our culture puts so much shame upon creating and upon free thought and upon getting into that right brain. I believe it's the right is the creative side. Yes. Yeah. But our culture is so left brain focused, and if it's not productive, and it's really that capitalistic mindset that if it's not productive and you're not working towards a solution, then it's not worth and the whole point of being an artist is exploring the journey, not the destination, and enjoying it and living in the nuance. And whenever everyone around you and your whole society and culture is telling you to be afraid and to just and to clam up, it's really hard to get into that free space. And I don't have a solution, but it's just that I think knowing that you're not alone and surrounding yourself with people that are also moving into that space encourages you and says, it's okay, come to the open waters, you're with people that care, and this is a place that you can explore. And we're not going to judge you based upon your productivity or based upon your ability to make profit or to create based on the rules that are put upon you. Does that make any sense?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me, you mentioned the sort of the right and left brain, and I was going to bring this up earlier. I know Karma and others of you on the call here are, have been involved with the secular community at various levels. And, the secular community tends to be a pretty cerebral environment, with a lot of emphasis on logic and reasoning, which are also, of course, super important. But there have been times where I've referred to the sort of the prototypical like atheist or secular person as like a Vulcan, like they don't have that immediate access to their emotions, it sometimes seems like, or maybe that's just how our conversations take place online or something. But I feel like when I'm cooking, or when I'm taking a walk with my partner, or, you know, kind of, I think photography is about seeing, you know, like how you view the world and inviting other people to see what you see maybe. And I suppose that's true of writing and painting and all of that as well. It's somehow like almost short circuits that left brain critical piece that's always saying, oh, it's not good enough, or, and I like that about cooking, because I'm not thinking about anything else when I'm doing it. I'm thinking about cooking. And, you know, maybe there's a way to get into that space that inspires you to create, where you're like, I don't know, reading a novel, and then that kind of gets you into the headspace where you're like, I could do some writing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that that's like part of doing a thing is experiencing a thing that's like that thing that's already been done, right? So finding something, you know, like for you, Ryan, you said cooking, you know, like Food Network. I've been watching so much Food Network, but that's the thing that's inspired me to cook, is I'm like, oh gosh, like I wish I could cook like that. I wish my food looked like that. So yeah, I totally agree. I think it's definitely like finding space in that genre or medium that really like gets you excited about it.
I don't want to call people out too much, but I'm going to. So I see a friend of mine, Booker, on the call. He's an artist, and you don't have to say anything, Booker, but if you have any thoughts, like I know you've led conversations similar to this for the Secular Student Fellowship at USC. Any thoughts about what are you doing right now in art, and how are you kind of approaching all of this during this coronavirus?
Yeah, so I'm also a photographer, and well, mostly, and intermediate. I've also had a lot of trouble finding the motivation to make art. Part of that's because of schools finishing up and finals and all that, but yeah, I don't know if I have much to add, but like, yeah, it's weird without having like an art community, and SSF as like stable community meeting every Monday, and like the ground's just been taken from under me, and now I'm just sort of, oh, what do I do now?
Yeah, totally. It's very bending. We have a lot of photographers. I see Josiah's on the webinar too. But Josiah is an amazing photographer. You want to say anything, Josiah?
Sure. I was just thinking about like, okay, for a lot of us, the reason that we do art is to help ourselves see what we're missing, or hear what we're missing, or think about what we're missing, see the world in a little bit of a different way so that we get all the things that we're missing. So in addition to a lot of the like psychological aspects that Karma was talking about that make it very difficult to produce art, for a lot of us, in order to explore seeing the things that we're missing, we feel like we have to be out in the world seeing the things, and we can't do that right now. So, or we are having to try and find other ways to see the world differently, because we can't just, like, being able to output art requires a certain amount of input of experience from the world, and the ways that we can acquire that input are having to change dramatically. So I think that also contributes to making it very difficult for a lot of artists to produce, in addition to a lot of the psychological factors of feeling like everything is so scatterbrained, or feeling ultra focused because of complex PTSD or whatever. So I think that's one of the things, input output, and we're having to find different ways to keep input so that we can see the world differently.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I had a thought, and then it flew away. Anybody else? What else are you doing for, like, we don't all have to be artists. I think consuming art, you know, like the old joke about playing the radio. I think I've sort of gotten back into listening to music, and my girlfriend and I are watching films that everybody's supposed to have seen that either one or the other of us haven't. So like I saw The Breakfast Club for the first time. Can you believe that? That's like my generation.
I can't.
I know. That's like my generation too. Like that was like everybody that's my age, like, and I watched it and I was like, yeah, that was pretty good, you know, but it's like 30 years old or whatever. So, so that's been kind of fun.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that like consuming art has been such a big focuser for me, because I have anxiety brain so bad. Like my intrusive thoughts will just spin in my head while I'm trying to work. And it's so distracting. So like I've started like putting Community on in the background, which is another thing that everyone's like, oh, you like have to see this, and I had never seen it, and now I love it. But like just having like art present in the room to distract my brain even while I'm trying to do something else has been super helpful and super calming. Like I fall asleep a lot with like the TV on or podcasts going or somebody reading a really old book, because those are the things that sort of distract my brain from getting caught up in that anxious cycle, right? So if there's like something else that like you folks are sort of experiencing, like art that's helping with maybe like anxiety or stress or things like that, I'm definitely totally down to hear them, because like it doesn't have to be creating, like experiencing is just as important.
The best thing I have done is downloaded that Sam Harris app, Waking Up. Oh my God, mindful meditation has changed my life in the last 4 or 5 months. I started doing it every morning, and it's like, for the first time, I feel like my brain sometimes just has absolutely nothing in it. And for the longest time, once I started to understand that I was running to shame, as soon as I felt that way, like, oh, you have to be thinking about something, you have to be worried, you have to be productive, you have to have something in there. And then as soon as I realized it's okay for it to be absolutely blank, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. So now a phrase I'm really living by is find the nothing. Like every time I feel anxiety coming, it's find the nothing and try to stay in that place and recognizing my thoughts and feelings. I know that's kind of off track, but you know, I know anxiety is also a really big issue for a lot of people, including myself. And I don't know if you've done that or not, but I've just found it really, really, I've told all my friends and family.
That makes me think of the memoirist Mark Salzman. Do any of you know Mark Salzman? He wrote a pretty famous memoir called Iron and Wine. I think it's called Iron and, but he wrote a short memoir fairly recently called Man in the Empty Boat, and it deals with what you're saying, Karma, too, like that critical voice or that anxiety and worry. And it's kind of whimsical and fun anyway. He ends up learning something about his dog, from his dog, who farts a lot, apparently. And he's like, so like, it's like in the worst time, you know, and he's just like, oh my God. And he related to like how he is frustrating to some people, and now how this dog is frustrating to him. And, you know, his big takeaway was like, the dog is doing the best he can. Like he's just a dog, you know, there's nothing the dog can really do about it. And then he kind of thought, well, like, what if I took that attitude towards myself, you know, or towards other people? Like I'm doing the best I can. It may not meet this standard. Like you were saying, Karma, like doing something badly. Like the first person I heard talk about that was Ira Glass, like how you have to do something poorly for a long time. Like your critic, your level of criticism of that art is much higher, much more elevated than your ability as a creator of that art. Your taste outstrips your ability. And then maybe one day your ability will actually meet your own taste, you know, but you have to kind of power through that. And then we're doing the best we can. Give ourselves a little break. Like, you know, we can't all be performing or like outputting. Like, you know, Kevin, you mentioned sort of this capitalist mentality of like producing. Like I have a podcast and I thought, oh, I'll probably have a lot more time, you know, like being home more and stuff. I haven't done one episode. Like I recorded one and I'm going to put it out pretty soon. And I have a few others in mind, but every time I get done with work, I'm just like, I'm beat. And I just haven't done the creating part. And I think part of it for me is just like giving myself permission to not right now if I don't want to.
Yeah, no, and that's important too. And I think like another thing to your point about like doing things badly is also like you don't have to be ashamed of how you experience things either. Like I know there's a lot of stigma around watching really bad TV, or reading really awful like dime store novels, right? Like people are like, "Ooh, you have such awful taste," right? But when you like, if you're experiencing something, there's not a wrong way to experience it. You know what I mean? Like I got this a lot, like because this is a thing that I feel so much shame about, but shouldn't. Good point. Is about reading fan fiction, right? So it's like a thing that I find so much joy in, right? But it's like people like shame you about it. But you shouldn't feel ashamed of how you experience something, right? Like you shouldn't feel shame for getting joy from you know, like werewolf fan fiction, or like I said, a dime store novel, or a really bad sitcom, or a soap opera, right? So if those are things that are bringing you comfort right now, I think it's important to remember that there's not a wrong way to make yourself happy as long as you're not like hurting people, and bad TV is not hurting anybody.
I'll confess, my girlfriend and I are watching Outlander.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like, oof, but it's fun.
Yeah, for sure. And then like, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with having fun?
Who wants to go next and confess the horrible thing they're watching that's making them happy?
Are you guys familiar with the phrase "the next right thing"?
I don't think so.
I follow a lot of Enneagram pages. I don't know if you ever got into that, Ryan. It's not really in academic circles, I guess, but anyway, whatever. It's kind of a personality test. Anyway, they talk a lot to Enneagram 4s, which are usually artists. They talk a lot to them about finding the next right thing. And it's been really helpful for me because when I get overwhelmed, I tend to, I feel overwhelmed because of this news I just read. And then I find thoughts that support that feeling. And so now I have more reasons not to do the thing that I need to do because I have this huge sense of being overwhelmed and anxious and things. And so the question for me is always, what's the next right thing? It's not a big thing. It's usually a very little thing. Like I'm building a target for my axe throwing. I want to throw axes in the backyard during quarantine. And so it's very overwhelming thinking about building this big thing. But what I've got to do is say, well, first I need to Google what are the plans. Stop, figure that out. Next, I need to go buy the wood. What size wood? And so it sounds a little childish, but I think when you look back, you see the productivity you've made. And when you tend to get overwhelmed or feel like you're not enough or feel like you could never do that, you're kind of right, but you're kind of wrong because you have to take it piece by piece.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right there. Like for sure. Like that's one of the biggest things with like creating right now is it's like, okay, like one word at a time, one paragraph at a time, one page at a time, right? So I think that really applies.
Yeah, I suppose that's a good approach for writing or even reading. I'm trying to read things that are sort of the opposite of like pulp fiction. I've been trying to read things that are a little over my head, but then I just take it a little bit at a time. So like some historically grounded stuff that I don't really understand the context very well. So I'm just kind of wading into it and seeing what happens. That might sound more like torture than actual pleasure, but yeah, it's just, trying different things, stimulate your brain in a different way. I just know that I sit in front of my computer too much and I need to move my body as well. When the end of the day comes along.
Maybe get into some like interpretive dance for stretching.
There you go. Or yeah, I don't know about that.
But yeah, one move at a time, right?
That's right, one move at a time. I can just like move my arms up like this.
And so you're already doing it.
Yeah, I'm already doing it. That's great. I wanted to ask a question about what you said about essential. I wrote down the word essential. You were talking about the way that artists get stigmatized in culture. I have a friend who he was a linguistics major in undergrad, and then he went on and got a master's degree in poetry. And now he's actually a published poet, and he does a lot of translating of poetry into English, mostly from Spanish. And then he builds this, he has this amazing network that he's built of people who can translate from other, usually Latin American, sometimes like there's some Russian translation going on. And that's his sort of world now, like literature and translation. But I'm sure, and I know that he's taken a lot of crap for being like a poetry major, like a master's degree in poetry. Like, what's that for? And then it made me think that in this current context, we've had some questions, a lot of questions come up about what is an essential worker, or what is essential and what's non-essential. So my girlfriend works at a radio station. So I always tease her that like she's essential because she's a news editor, and I'm totally expendable. Like I'm just taking up space, consuming resources, and she can get rid of me at any time. But like artists, I think we've too long put that in a kind of expendable category. Do you think that art will rebound after, these stay-at-home orders dwindled, and maybe after we get a vaccine and we can typically like gather in communities again?
I think that's a really good question. And I did a lot of reading before this presentation, right? Number one, because like I love to read, but number two, because like I'm not an art major. Like I don't know all of the things about all of the stuff. And I was reading this thing from a Harvard blog, and somebody in that article said, art is important, but we can live without it. And I took that so personally. I was like, you're telling me you think we can live without art right now? I don't think I could live without art right now. I think that it would be much harder to live without art right now, at least. So I think that, I don't know, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that people are sort of understanding the value of art and creating and experiencing art and things like that. And like I said, I've sort of noticed people sort of like laying off of the whole like, oh, what good do you do type of mentality, especially, like music and gaming, like video games, game design, stuff like that. Things that are like actively engaging people, I guess. Not that visual art can't do that, but yeah, I think that I'm hopeful because I think that this has really sort of shone a light on how art really does impact like our day-to-day lives so like strongly, right? So like I wake up, I put on Netflix, and that keeps me calm all day. Or like I ordered like a paint by diamond thing because that's supposed to be fun and engaging and calming. Like things like that, things that while we could probably live without them, it would be much harder to live without them, right? So I think that people are sort of starting to see that. And I'm hopeful that like after all this, it's that feeling of sort of impact is still there.
I think we probably take it for granted too. Like I think there's so much art, like when that person said they could do without it, I thought, they probably don't even know how much art they consume every day, whether it's like just through the radio, turning on music, watching television, the way that there's public art around that sort of makes their drive more bearable or something like that. It would just be like bleak gray walls, and they probably have art hanging in their home because they want their home to feel more like warm and habitable.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's a thing too that I think people don't think about is like, if you think about a life without art, like you're thinking about a life without having toys for your children. You're thinking about a life where like all of your walls are white. That feels so clinical, and cold and kind of sad to me, at least. I love, like I have so much art on my walls, but you're thinking of like imagination will still exist, but like does that mean art still exists? And that like limits, like I said, like activities for your children. You don't have toys, you don't have coloring books, you don't have and I bet that would drive any parent crazy right now. Like I can't imagine being a parent right now. Like props to all y'all.
Mine are grown, I'm so happy.
Yeah, so I mean, like you're even like little things, like I just thinking about it, like your pillowcases and your comforters would be like, right, what, white, yeah, like there would be no like expression, I don't think. So it like things would be just very like, I don't know, like the way you think about sort of here's a good example. I don't know if anyone ever read the Dr. Seuss book Hooray for Diff and Do for Day, and it's like so obscure because it was published after he passed away. But there's like a difference. There's one school that's like a boarding school, like, and they wear all gray and they all have the same haircut. And that's another thing, haircuts, and things like that. And then the other school is like really art rich and playful and things like that. And so I think that we would be looking at like a really weird dichotomy where if art didn't exist, we would all be really like sad.
Yeah, I don't even think we know what it would be like. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like that, like I said, there are things that you don't even think about, right? Like you were talking about, Ryan. You know, like things you don't even understand as art are still art. You know, like clothing and like I said, like your bed covers and all of the products you use and stuff like that.
Yeah, sometimes kind of like my fascination with the fact that food has flavor. You know, like I suppose evolutionarily it would entice us to eat things that, you know, but there are things probably that are kill you that taste good too, but like flavor in food is, you know, like overall kind of extraneous, right? It's not necessary. Like you could eat something and get the nutrition. You could take a pill. I mean, not that we can't, but maybe one day, like you could take a pill that would satisfy all of your nutritional needs and your caloric needs, and then that would be it. You wouldn't have to eat. And sometimes I wish I had that for lunch, because I think lunch is like a really like extraneous thing to have to do. I like cooking and I like eating, but 3 meals a day is just excessive. Like I get so annoyed that I have to stop 3 times a day to feed myself. And maybe one day I won't, you know, but then like, I'm so glad that food has flavor. Otherwise eating would be so boring, even though I would have to do it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
I'm looking for Hooray for Diff and Do for Day.
Oh yeah.
There's a few. I'll post one in the chat. I don't know if it's any good because I haven't watched it, but there's a couple of videos of it being read out loud, and the whole thing is 12 minutes, so it's very short.
Yeah, it's this kind of like really fun sort of, you know, Dr. Seuss story about this really kind of like oddball teacher who's like very into being expressive and teaching her students how to express themselves. And they have to take this standardized test. And if all of the students fail the standardized test, then they have to go to the boarding school where they all have the same haircut and wear the same gray clothes. And so it's really like this really poignant like children's story about like how important it is to like be expressive and like experience art and create art and things like that. So I think it's really cool. Like it's like I said, not a lot of people have read it because it was published like after he died, so it's not illustrated by him, but it's one of my favorites. So
yeah, maybe this all has to do with the fact, I mean, I was just thinking, Josiah a minute ago in the chat said he's, you know, trying to figure out, and I hope you succeed, sir, to pin down more specifically why art is essential. And I wonder, when you said, we were talking about food and Booker said food can be art as well. And then I started thinking about the only way that we can experience the world at all is through our senses, our 5 senses. That's the only way we can interact with anybody or learn anything or understand anything about the world that we live in. And since that's the case, being sensory creatures, that maybe there's something about color or motion or music that heightens our ability to understand our environment, our natural world. I'm trying to think of the name of the scientist who wrote that famous book about music, and he has that book, When I Mistook My Wife for a Hat or something like that. He died recently. He's a famous, I'll find it. He died a couple years ago, and he wrote this amazing, he was a secular Jew, and he wrote this amazing reflection on death and dying and how he didn't think he was going anywhere when he died and how he was okay with that. Anyway, Oliver Sacks. That's who I was.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. Anybody else have an example of something they're doing to keep themselves going, or how you're thinking about the value of art in a pandemic? Oh, here's an interesting question. Do you think that in the coming months and years, the pandemic will feature in art? Like, do you think it will influence future art, people who having lived through this, whether it be in fiction or paintings, or, because I know my generation, 9/11 had a big impact on the way that we thought about our world, because it changed, for many of us, it changed, probably most of us, it changed our perception of the world. It changed the way that we think about, like, whether the United States is part of a global community or not, and the way terrorism affects us, and the way religion actually functions in the world in way broader ways than we maybe took for granted before. And I read somewhere that the 1918 pandemic really didn't end up showing up in artistic expressions in the years following it. Like the writers of that generation, like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway, like, didn't really reflect much on the 1918 flu pandemic, which killed, like, how many million people? It was, or maybe 500,000 people died or something from that flu. So anyway, I just wonder if you think, or if you're seeing signs that the art is already being influenced by this.
Yeah, actually, I have thoughts on that. So, first of all, at the start of the pandemic, I made a pandemic painting myself. So this is me, and this is supposed to represent, like, so I have to do Zoom call classes because I'm in high school and I do, like, a bunch of classes for online stuff. And then I have, like, people who are responding to the pandemic painted in red over the black, so you can kind of, and then I have, like, a corona, actual, like,
coronavirus.
Yeah, and if you're on TikTok, there are a bunch of, like, TikTok sounds and stuff that are about the coronavirus. So I think that's our own, like, being influenced by the coronavirus.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up TikTok, because I haven't figured it out yet. It's a little like Snapchat to me, where I was like, that's where I draw the line. But I am hearing a lot about it in pop culture, and a lot of expression is happening there.
Yeah, like, I recently just fell into that whole, like, I resisted it for a while, because I was like, I am too old for this, which is weird because I'm only like 23, but I was like, I'm too old for this. That's like my brother's age group type thing, but I've fallen into the hole. It's really interesting. Like, they're like Emily mentioned, the sounds, the, like, remixes and songs and things that people are coming up with. And sort of like comedy as an art as well on there has really evolved since all of this started.
Oh yeah,
so,
comedy.
yeah.
That's a good one. So we're coming up on an hour here, so I wanted to just give anybody any last thoughts. And
I wanted to jump in again with
please.
Another mental health piece, I guess. Don't want to always be that way, but whatever. I would just like to say, I mean, yesterday I did a Zoom training on just grieving during the pandemic, and a lot of people haven't lost someone they know, but they've lost things. They've lost their routine. They may have lost income, or just the fun things that they get to do socially. And there's so many unknowns still. You know, depending on where you live, your state might already be back to somewhat normal, whatever normal is. And other states are still pretty locked down right now. But it's even hard to plan right now. Like, I work in education, so we don't even know what the next school year will look like. Will we go back? Will we still be remote learning? The vacation I had planned, is that going to happen? I don't know. You know, to where you don't even know what all you've lost yet, was kind of the point of that that training I was part of yesterday, that we're all grieving and we might not even have it all having hit us yet. So any emotion you're experiencing, the lack of productivity, the you know, feeling stuck and not being able to create right now, or even like I'm experiencing where I just want to lose myself in a TV show and kind of just fall into that, but I can't. I'm like not able to engage with it the way I want to. Like I can't just get lost in it. I have too many things on my mind, or I'm too distracted with reading emails or whatever. So I think it's important to just remember that everything's valid, that your experiences are completely valid and normal and fine, because we've never been through this before. So that was just kind of my 2 cents on a mental health piece.
That's good. My therapist used to always tell me that I underestimated the impact that the world was having on me. Like I would say things like, I don't know why I'm so exhausted. And she'd say, you don't? Really? Because there's this, and this. And I'd be like, yeah, that's true. So I think, you know, it's kind of easy to kind of, especially if you're not sick with the coronavirus and you don't know anybody that's sick with the coronavirus, you're like, why am I experiencing this blah? And it is impacting us in ways we don't even know. And this is one of the things that we're hoping to do to work on that, you know, having more of these. And I know this is just one. I'm sure that you have other networks of people, whether it's through your classes or your university or your college, your high school, or your friend group or whatever. I know a bunch of my friend groups have gotten together on Zoom. We've done happy hours and things like that. And I've even missed a couple because I was like, I've been on Zoom all day. I can't do another Zoom. You know, as much as I'd love to see your face, I was like, I gotta like time out. So, you know, do what you got to do to get through this, and definitely share. You know, I loved seeing your painting, Emily. That was amazing, and we'd love to see whatever else you all are creating, whether you're writing poetry or I'm a huge fan of short fiction. So if you have like short stories that you've written, or paintings, drawings that you've done, even partially finished things, you know, I think it's just fun to share that with each other. And whether you're in the Secular Student Alliance leader space, or I know I'm always excited to receive kind of cool things that people are doing. So keep at it. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. But any final words, Karma? I want to thank you and give you the last word. Thank you so much for doing this and sharing this with us and making us think about all this stuff. It's really helpful.
Well, no, thank you. Like, I was so excited to have this opportunity, and I'm so glad that like we had such a robust discussion. That was so exciting. No, and I appreciate the venue and the time and everybody like being here and engaging. It's sometimes when you teach freshmen, it's hard to get this level of engagement. So this is so refreshing. I'm so excited. About like how this conversation went and to carry it on in leader space and see if it shares, people share. So yeah, thank you so much, Ryan. And like I said, like I'm so glad that like we got to do this.
Yeah, good stuff. The next one that we're doing is on Monday, I think, and it's our another student leader named Michael Surgeon. He's up in Oregon, and he's doing something quite different. It's about secular organizing in the queer space, queer secular organizing. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. And I've been streaming this to Facebook, so it'll be on Facebook to share as a video in our Secular Student Alliance video page. So share it if you like. And if you're not in leader space as a student leader, definitely hit me up. I'd be delighted to add you there, and we'll keep the conversation going. Thanks, everyone. Take care. You still there, Josiah?